My son looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, she deserves better. I sold your house to show her you mean nothing." I nodded quietly and moved out without a word. But when he came back with her to claim the house, another couple was already standing at the door holding the keys, because I had sold it to someone else. If you want to hear how this story unfolds, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 68 years old. For most of my life, I worked as a nurse, caring for others day and night. When my husband passed away, the house we built together became my safe place. Every room carried memories of laughter, late-night talks, and the family we raised inside those walls. It was more than a home. It was a piece of my soul. My son Michael used to love that house as much as I did. As a boy, he would run through the halls with muddy shoes, hide under the staircase during storms, and fall asleep on the couch while pretending to study. I never thought the same son I had carried in my arms would one day see me not as his mother, but as an obstacle to his own pride. Michael had grown into a man who wanted more than he had. He was 36 now, ambitious but restless, and eager to impress his fiancée Sabrina. She was younger than him, elegant, and always dressed as though she were walking into a magazine cover. To her, appearances were everything. To him, her approval mattered more than his own family. That morning, I set the table for breakfast, like always. A pot of coffee steamed gently, the smell of buttered toast filled the air, and the quiet hum of the clock reminded me how still the house could be. Michael came in with Sabrina, their eyes exchanging some silent message I couldn't read. I tried to welcome them warmly, but I noticed the coldness in Michael's expression, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I smiled and said, "Michael, you've always loved this place. Do you remember how you used to hide cookies under the couch cushions?" He gave a half smile, but his tone was sharp. "Mom, things have to change. Sabrina and I have plans I didn't understand then what he truly meant. I thought it was just talk of moving forward in life, maybe looking for a house of their own. What I didn't realize was that he had already decided my house, the place I had poured my entire life into, was the price he was willing to pay for her love. That day was the beginning of a betrayal I never expected from my own blood. The truth came out on a quiet afternoon that started like any other. I had just finished watering the plants on the porch when Michael pulled into the driveway. He didn't even greet me the way he used to. No hug, no smile, just a quick glance and a sharp tone in his voice. Sabrina was in the car, waiting, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. His voice clipped. I felt a heaviness in my chest before he even opened his mouth again. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had fed him breakfast before school, where we had celebrated birthdays, and where I had comforted him after his first heartbreak. Now, his eyes were cold, his hands folded, like a man delivering news to a stranger. "I sold the house," he said flatly. I blinked, certain I had misheard. What did you say?" "I sold it," he repeated, leaning back in his chair. "It's done. Sabrina and I talked about it. She deserves better than this old place. I couldn't let her think I was tied down here. You'll have to pack up and move." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words felt like a punch to the chest. My son, the boy I had carried for 9 months, the man I had raised through sacrifice and love, was telling me that my life, my memories, my home, meant nothing. I whispered, my voice shaking, "Michael, this house is mine. You had no right." He shrugged as though it didn't matter. "I had every right. You wouldn't understand. Sabrina deserves a future that isn't stuck in the past. She's embarrassed by this place. I had to prove to her that she comes first." Anger and grief clashed inside me, but I didn't raise my voice. I looked at him, my own flesh and blood, and said quietly, "And where do I go, Michael? Where does your mother fit in your future?" He didn't even look ashamed. He only stood, sliding the chair back roughly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll figure it out. You always do." I watched him walk out the door, back to Sabrina's waiting car. She didn't even glance at me as they drove away. My hands shook as I sat at the table alone, staring at the faded patterns on the wood I had polished 1,000 times. That night, I packed my things. Not everything, just a few boxes. The photo albums, my husband's old watch, the quilt my mother had made for me when I was a child. Every item I touched carried a story, and every story felt stolen from me by the very person I had given everything to. I moved quietly, without argument. There were no fights, no begging, no tears in front of him. I refused to let him see me broken. I left the keys on the counter and walked out the door, carrying only the things I could hold in my arms and the dignity I refused to lose. But as I closed the door behind me, something inside me hardened. He thought he had won. He thought I would accept his betrayal and fade away quietly. He thought I was too old, too weak, too dependent to stand on my own. He was wrong. I may have been wounded, but I was not powerless. That house was mine, and the law knew it. He had acted behind my back, but the papers were still in my name. I realized then that his so-called victory was nothing more than words. The deed was not his to give. As I stood on the porch one last time, I made a promise to myself. If he wanted to take my home to prove my worth meant nothing, I would show him what true strength looked like. He wanted me out quietly. I would leave, yes, but not in defeat. I walked away that night, not just as a mother betrayed, but as a woman preparing for a reckoning. I spent the first few nights after leaving the house in a small rented room above a friend's garage. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and the walls felt bare compared to the life I had left behind. But while I sat on that creaky bed with my few boxes stacked against the wall, I thought long and hard about what had happened. My son had betrayed me. Not out of desperation, but out of pride. He wanted to prove his devotion to a woman by erasing me. That thought hurt more than anything else, but it also gave me clarity. I had lived my life giving to others, patients at the hospital, neighbors in need, my family at every turn. I had sacrificed, endured, and forgave more times than I could count. But this time was different. This time I was not going to bend until I broke. This time I was going to fight, even if my fight looked nothing like shouting or screaming. One morning, I called an old friend of mine, Richard, who had worked in real estate for decades. He had helped my husband and me purchase our house all those years ago. When he answered the phone, his voice still carried the same warmth it always had. "Evelyn, it's been years," he said. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Richard, I need your help. I need to sell my house. Quietly, quickly, and to someone who will close the deal fast." He hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure? That home means the world to you." "It used to," I answered, "but it means nothing if it becomes a weapon to be used against me. I want control of what happens next. Not my son, not his fiancée." Richard agreed to meet me that afternoon. We sat in his office, the smell of old paper and polished wood filling the air. I handed him the deed, still in my name, untouched by any deal Michael thought he had made. Richard raised his eyebrows. "Evelyn, your son doesn't own anything. This is still yours. Whatever he told you, whatever he promised her, it's nothing without this paper." I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to smile. Then let's make sure it stays that way. Within a week, Richard had found a couple, a kind, middle-aged pair who had been searching for a home to start their new life together. They loved the house the moment they stepped through the front door. I watched them smile at the kitchen where I had spent so many mornings, and instead of feeling grief, I felt relief. My memories would always be mine, but now the walls would hold new story. We signed the paperwork quickly, without any fuss. As I held the pen in my hand, I thought of Michael. I thought of the arrogance in his voice when he told me I meant nothing, that Sabrina deserved better. And I thought of what it would feel like when he returned to that house expecting to own it, only to find strangers already holding the keys. My hands stopped trembling, and I signed my name with steady strength. That night, back in my small rented room, I packed away the deed and the receipts, tucking them into a drawer. I sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the town, and for the first time in days, I slept peacefully. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't powerless. I had chosen silence as my shield and patience as my weapon. Michael thought he had stripped me of everything, but in truth, he had given me something new, the chance to remind him who I really was. Not a weak woman he could push aside, not an old mother desperate for his approval. I was Evelyn Hart, and my dignity was not for sale. The turning point had come and gone. I no longer felt like a victim. I was the one in control now, and soon my son would learn the sharpest lesson of his life. The day came sooner than I expected. Michael had not spoken to me since the afternoon he told me I meant nothing, but I knew him well enough to predict what was coming. He wanted to make a show of power. He wanted to walk through that front door with Sabrina at his side and parade around the house as if it were theirs. I heard about their plans through a neighbor. Michael had told people in the neighborhood that he and his fiancée would be moving in soon. He spoke loudly about renovations, how Sabrina wanted to redesign the kitchen, how the old curtains would be torn down and replaced. My heart ached when I first heard it, but then I reminded myself of the papers safely tucked away in my drawer. The house no longer belonged to him, and soon he would discover it the hard way. That afternoon, I parked across the street in my friend's car, sitting quietly with the window slightly rolled down. I wasn't there to fight, and I wasn't there to humiliate him in front of strangers. I was there because I needed to see with my own eyes the moment when the truth would cut deeper than any words I could ever say. Michael pulled up in his shiny black car, Sabrina stepping out in a crisp white dress and expensive heels. They looked so sure of themselves, as if the world were theirs to claim. Michael puffed out his chest, walked up to the front door and reached for the handle, but before he could touch it, the door opened. A middle-aged couple stepped out, smiling warmly. The man held a small set of keys, and the woman carried a box labeled kitchen. They froze when they saw Michael and Sabrina standing there with their suitcases. "Oh," the man said politely, "you must be the previous owners. I just want to say thank you. This house is everything we dreamed of. We can't believe how quickly the papers went through." Michael blinked, his hands still frozen in midair. His face turned pale. "Papers? What papers?" The woman smiled, not noticing his confusion. "The sale, of course. Mrs. Hart was wonderful to work with. We're so grateful she chose us. Such a lovely home." Sabrina's jaw dropped. She turned on Michael, her voice sharp. "What is she talking about? You told me this house was ours. You told me it was done." Michael's face twisted with panic. He stammered, It was. I made arrangements. This can't be right. This is a mistake." The man frowned slightly, pulling the keys from his pocket. "No mistake. Everything is legal. We signed last week. The house belongs to us now." Sabrina's face turned red, her anger spilling out in every word. "You lied to me, Michael. You told me you took care of everything. You sold me a fantasy, not a house." She shoved his arm away, her heels clicking against the porch as she stormed back toward the car. Michael stood there, frozen, the weight of humiliation heavy on his shoulders. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The neighbors had gathered quietly on their lawns, watching. Whispers passed from one to another, and Michael's pride shrank under their eyes. From across the street, I stepped out of the car. My legs trembled, but I walked with purpose. Michael saw me, and his face filled with a mix of rage and shame. "Mom," he spat, his voice low and angry. "What did you do?" I stopped a few feet away, keeping my head high. "I did what you never thought I could. I sold the house myself, legally, properly, because it was never yours to sell." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "You embarrassed me. You ruined everything." I looked at him calmly, my voice steady. "No, Michael, you ruined everything the moment you decided your mother meant nothing. This house was built on love and sacrifice, not lies, and love will never belong to someone who treats it like dirt." The new couple shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing they had walked into family pain they hadn't expected, but they nodded politely to me, then carried their boxes inside, closing the door behind them. The sound of that door shutting was the final note in a song Michael had written for himself. Sabrina had already started the car. She leaned out the window, her voice sharp with disgust. "You made a fool of me, Michael. If you can't even give me what you promised, what good are you?" Then she drove off, leaving him standing on the porch alone. Michael turned back to me, his eyes burning with anger and humiliation. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I shook my head. No, my son. You'll regret ever thinking you could take what wasn't yours. I walked away slowly, not in triumph, but in peace. I didn't need to shout or gloat. The truth had spoken louder than I ever could. The house was gone, but my dignity was intact. And for me, that was the greatest victory of all. After that day, everything felt different. For years, I had believed my home was my anchor, the place that tied me to my husband's memory and to the family we raised together. Losing it should have broken me, but it didn't. Watching Michael stand powerless on that porch, realizing his lies had collapsed around him, made me see the truth. My strength was never in the bricks and wood of that house. My strength had always been in me. When I returned to my small, rented room that evening, I sat by the window and let the quiet sink in. I no longer felt the crushing weight of betrayal. Instead, I felt something stronger, relief. I had faced my own son's cruelty and walked away with dignity. That was worth more than any house could ever give me. The next few weeks passed quietly. Sabrina never came back to Michael. Word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened, and Michael kept his distance. Pride had always been his armor, and now it was cracked. Part of me grieved the distance between us, but another part knew I had done what was necessary. I settled into a smaller home a few streets away. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. The walls were bare at first, but I filled them with the things that mattered. Photographs of my children when they were young, the quilt my mother stitched by hand, the chair where my husband used to read every evening. These little things reminded me that no one could take away the life I had lived or the love I had given. One afternoon, as I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found myself staring at a family photo. It was of me, Michael, and his sister Anna, taken years ago in front of that very house. We were smiling, our arms wrapped around one another, the kind of smile that comes only from belonging. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't out of sadness. It was acceptance. Families change, children grow, and sometimes the ones you give everything to forget the weight of your sacrifices. But that does not erase your worth. A week later, Michael came to see me. His knock on the door was hesitant, almost guilty. When I opened it, he stood there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes avoiding mine. For the first time in years, he looked less like a man trying to impress the world and more like the boy I had once raised. "Mom," he muttered, his voice low. I messed up. I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the small kitchen table, the same way he had at our old home, only now the space felt different, quieter, simpler. He rubbed his hands together nervously. "Sabrina's gone. She said I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't give her the life she wanted. I tried to prove myself by taking everything from you, and I lost her anyway. I hurt you for nothing." His words should have brought me comfort, but instead they brought me sadness. He still didn't understand. It wasn't about Sabrina. It was about the respect he had thrown away. I looked at him steadily. "Michael, I don't care that she left you. What hurts me is that you thought so little of me. You thought my worth was measured by a house. And you forgot that I gave you everything I had. You forgot who I was to you." Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide them. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know how to fix it." I sighed, my heart torn between anger and love. Some things can't be fixed with words. Trust is like glass, Michael. Once it's shattered, the cracks never truly disappear. But I am still your mother, and I will never stop being your mother. He nodded silently, his face heavy with regret. After he left, I sat at the table alone. For a moment, I wondered if I had done the right thing, if silence and patience had been too cruel a lesson. But then I remembered the way he had looked at me, humbled, stripped of pride. Maybe this was the only way he would ever understand. In time, maybe he will rebuild that trust, or maybe he won't. But either way, I know I am no longer a victim. I am no longer the woman waiting for her son's approval. I am Evelyn Hart. I am strong, and I will never again let anyone, family or not, decide my worth. Houses can be bought and sold. Respect cannot. If this ending touched you, subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.